Alright, so on number 4 you have a table and then there's 3 different parts to it, A, B, and C. Before we get into the table and what these different columns mean, let's just maybe solve these things first. So let's start with A. So 4x plus 10 equals 10. So I just want to get the x by itself. Right? And so what I do is that I've got 2 numbers to get rid of. I've got a 4 and a 10. And we use inverse operations, or we do the opposite to get rid of stuff. So if you want to get rid of a plus 10, then we would subtract 10. And then we have our golden rule of what we do to one, we do to the other. 10 minus 10 would be 0. So this says 4 times what number would make 0? Well, 4 times 0, right, would have to be 0. But I can prove that is that if I divided both sides by 4, I get x is equal to 0. Right? And you can get x as an answer. So sometimes students think they made a mistake when they get x or get 0 as an answer, but 0 is a number just like anybody else, so there's nothing wrong with that. Oh, there's the bell. Alright, now, so when you say x is equal to 0, I think maybe sometimes we forget maybe what that might even mean. So let's say if I plugged in 0, so if I took my answer and I tested it, so instead of, let's say this is x right here, right, 4x plus 10 equals 10, so let's say I plugged in 0. Well, 4 times 0 is just 0, and then I get 10 is equal to 10. Well, that's true. 10 is equal to 10. Right? So when you solve an equation, that's what you're finding. You're finding the number that you could plug back into the equation, and then it would work. It would give you a true statement. What I mean by that is that let's plug in, I guess to see a difference, is then let's plug in a different number and see what would happen there. So let's say I plugged in a 3. So if I plugged in a 3, I'd have 4 times 3, which is 12, and 12 plus 10, which is 22. Well, 22 is not equal to 10. That's false. And that would have been true for any number you had plugged in. So pick any other number in the universe besides 0, and you would end up with something where the numbers didn't match. 0 is the only number that you could plug in right here that would get these two numbers to match up with each other. Everything else would not work. Right? So because there's only one number that we could plug in for x that would give you a true statement, that means that there's only one solution. So for 4x plus 10 equals 10, the answer there, or at least the box we would check, would be one solution. Alright, so let's try another one and then we'll see if we can make sense of no solution and infinite many solutions. So let's plug this in. 6x minus 13 equals 6x plus 13. I've got x's on 2 different sides, so what I can't do this. I can't combine those two things because they're not on the same side. So when variables are on different sides, you have to kind of pick one up and move it to the other side. How we move stuff is we do the opposite. So the opposite of a plus 6x, or a positive 6x, would be to subtract 6x. Now, those cancel, because 6 minus 6 is 0. But what looks strange here is that we're not used to this also then canceling. So what happens is actually both of the x's cancel out, and the only thing that's left is negative 13 is equal to 13. And this might look a little strange because you're like, well, how am I supposed to solve for x if if the x's canceled each other out? Well, they did cancel each other out, and then what we have to do is look at what's left over. So this says negative 13 is equal to 13. Well, no, that's not true. Right? 13 is equal to 13, or negative 13 is equal to negative 13, but not negative 13 and a positive 13. So that's false. So they're actually, then we're like, well, does that mean that there's no answer or there's no solution? Well, let's do the same thing that we did over here. We plugged it back in to kind of test it. So let's do the same thing there. Plug it back in, and then we're going to kind of test to see what answer we got. Move my work over. Don't you wish you could do that? Pick up your work and move it. That would be nice. All right, so let's take 6x minus 13 equals 6x plus 13. And so let's plug in a number. Let's plug in 2. So if I plugged in 2, I'd get 12 minus 13, which would be a negative 1. Here I'd get 12 plus 13, which would be 25. Well, negative 1 equals 25. That's not true. Let's say I tried another number. Well, what you're going to see is that it doesn't matter what number I plug in. I'm not going to get these two numbers to match. 18 minus 13 is 5. 18 plus 13 is 31. That's not true either. So because the x's canceled each other out, it doesn't even matter what you put in for x, because what's going to be left over are two numbers that don't match. So since there's no number in the universe that we could plug in that would give us a true statement, then we would say that there is no solution. All right, so let's move on to part C. All right, so let's look at part C. So part C, you might almost kind of think looks similar to what we saw in B, and we're going to see that it is very similar in the sense that the x's cancel each other out. So you might already be thinking, oh, okay, so it's going to be a no solution. Well, but you have to look and see what's left over. So 7 is equal to 7. Well, that's true. 7 is equal to 7. So what that means is that it's not a no solution. What it means is that there's going to be infinite many solutions. And what we mean by that is that you can plug in any number that you want to think of for x, and it doesn't really matter because the x's are going to cancel anyways. So what's left over will be two numbers that match. 7 does equal 7, so it's true. So since the x's cancel, it doesn't matter what you plug in for x. So that's why it would be infinite many solutions. And then you think, well, why wasn't that the case for part B? Well, part B, when things canceled out, you had a false statement. So that's the difference, is that with no solution, you're going to end up with a false statement, whereas infinite many solutions, you're going to end up with a statement that's true. All right, so make sure you've got that copied down. Pause the video now and try 4.2 and 4.3. All right, so let's check your answers for 4.2 and 4.3. So for 4.2, you should have got infinite, infinite, because they both canceled and would end up with true statements. And then for the last one solution, because you'd get x equals 0 when you went to solve it. And then 4.3, the first one would be infinite. X's cancel and leave you 3 equals 3, which is true. One solution, when you solve this, you'd actually get an answer, which in this case you should have got negative 4. And then for the last one here, 7x plus 15, you would have got no solution, because when the x's cancel, you get 15 equals negative 15, which is not true. So that would be false. All right, so that concludes number 5. Let's move on to number 6.